always make sure the equipment is well maintained.
Whoa.
And greetings, everybody. Keith here, hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Hopefully, as we learn and grow, the springboard accidents like the ones you just saw will be less and less, and the people that will be there to catch us when those things happen will grow and grow as well. Faith, people, faith. We have Moose here with us tonight. We're going to go over some identification stuff for the bitch-ass slaves so you can learn that you're a bitch-ass slave. And I'm not trying to be mean about that, folks, because I've admitted I was the fucking fool all my life. I was a bitch-ass slave all my life. There are still things in my life that tend to make me a bitch-ass slave somehow, some way, no matter how much I try to stand up. And that's what we're trying to learn how to get away from. So, greetings, Moose. How's it going tonight, brother?
Greetings, Wizard. It's going well, and I'll be your bitch-ass slave on the panel because I am here to learn more about how not to be a bitch-ass slave. And I gave you my word I'd be here, and here I am, sir.
Awesome, awesome. First, we're going to take a look at... oops. That's not the right one. Which one is it? I've got to find the right page, folks. There we go. Okay. On the screen before you, you have, I punched in Iowa Resident Agency. I'm pretty sure you can do this in your search engines too. And according to the location of the device, it's going to likely pull up the agency within your own area. And what it's likely going to pull up, as we see here, is FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Okay? The first thing that is recorded is the birth clerk records at the hospital a birth registration. This goes to the Bureau of Vital Statistics. And it talks about resident agencies, and that's the whole problem, folks. New Iowa residents obtaining a driver's license or ID. Either a license or ID is pertaining to a residency. Just like a hospital has a residency where the doctors and nurses stay at the hospital for a certain length of time, they call them residencies. And it's related to their occupation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation operates under the Interstate Identification Index. The Interstate Identification Index, according to WEX, the three I's, pronounced triple I, aka FBI triple I teletype, is a national index of state and federal criminal histories or rap sheets in the United States of America, maintained by the Federal Bureau of Investigation at the National Crime Information Center, NCIC. You hear about this all the time. You see it all the time on TV series and stuff. Included in this index are individuals. We know the definition of that individual. That's that person. That's that state ID. That's that social security enumeration at birth that establishes the person, the individual. And then upon age 18, age of majority, the young man or woman goes forth and opens the account of the individual and starts to operate it as a Title 4D contract officer without knowing, of course. For a serious or criminal offense anywhere in the country, And to be arrested for those serious or criminal offenses, you have to have an ID. You have to have a name, and it has to be in that system. Otherwise, they don't know who you are. Is it any of their business? See, again, if it's truly a trust operation, the trust is supposed to protect both of the property that is to be transferred to the beneficiary and the beneficiary so that he may receive the property. The following criteria about the individual must also be met for inclusion in the index. Known to the FBI, have a date of birth of 1956 or later, or were arrested for the first time and reported to the FBI since July 1974, regardless of date of birth, and older records for certain fugitives and repeat offenders. There are exclusions for records in III, which include subjects not meeting age and or arrest criteria. See, again, the arrest criteria is they have to be able to identify you. Every time they try to accuse you of a crime or trespass, or they're going to investigate you, they want to know who you are. This is telling us that they don't know who we are to begin with, or they're placating that they know who we are, but they still need that fucking identification. And they need you to admit to it. You see a problem with that, Moose? Well, we'll wait till Moose comes back.
They don't know who you are.
Exactly.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, they don't know who you are.
How is it they don't know who we
And if you
are?
know who you are, why is it? Because they probably don't know who the fuck they are, right?
Absolutely. Can you support that with verse?
No, I'm actually not. I'm not as versed as you. I need to do my reading.
Well, let's show you. This
Trying to
is
get the damn
John
computer
8.
working over here.
Okay. This is John 8. And just so you know, Moose, in regards to restreaming, you can always go back and restream the whole thing just by when it's done, restream it then. It's up to you. Jesus answered, this is John 8, verse 14 through 20. Jesus answered and said unto them, though I bear record of myself, yet my record is true. For I know whence I came and whither I go, but ye cannot tell whence I come and whither I go. Ye judge after flesh. I judge no man. And I've said this many times. I'm not judging you as the man. I'm judging the words that we use and the things that we say and do against each other. And yet, if I judge, my judgment is true, for I'm not alone, but I and the Father that sent me. See, if it's his word that is true, then that's what I must truly judge, the words. It is also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. I am one that bears witness of myself, and the Father that sent me beareth witness of me. That's the two. Then said they unto him, where is thy Father? See, they questioned his faith. Did his Father have to be present for him to have that faith that he was there? That's what his faith is all about, that his Father is there. So if his Father is there, and they know that's what faith is founded on, and they're questioning him, where is thy Father? Particularly as Pharisees, Jesus answered, ye neither know me nor my Father. If ye had known me, ye should have known my Father. This is a reference to the image and likeness, because ye are of my Father just like I am of my Father. And if you are asking where my Father is, you're asking where your Father is, telling me you don't know who your Father is. Because he's right here, like I said. And you already know and affirm this. See, this is their oath under God. How are you to placate that you don't recognize the very image and likeness? This is pathetic. This is why we need to wake up and learn the plain language of how this stuff works. So let's go back. It says there are exclusions for records in III, which include subjects not meeting age and or arrest criteria, juvenile offenders tried as juveniles, charges of drunkenness and vacancy, certain. So if they're excluded for records, III, why are they using the III and the fingerprint system to identify people that don't carry identification? Certain public order offenses, non-specific charges of suspicion or investigation. See, this is where they want to check that record, and they need your identification, and you have to qualify that identification, right? And social history data.
And when they check your, like, if you give them the name, if you give them your Christian name and then your last name, your surname, then don't they put that on a record every time they
Right.
stop you?
Right, but I was surrounded by eight people one time, 2 FBI agents, 2 special detectives, 2 local police officers, and 2 DHS workers from the state level. They were there on harboring fugitive charges because they were on a manhunt for a man and his woman and their 3 little girls, because they wanted to live peacefully as a family. And grandma and grandpa decided they needed a different kind of education than what mom and dad were providing them under God. And so they tried to get me for harboring a fugitive, and they surrounded me. And this is the first time I got to offer them the bicycle driver's license. It's the only identification I carry in my wallet, besides the PayPal card. When I go to the store, I will carry that with me. But what we're talking about is just a simple little cartoon card, bicycle driver's license, license number 911, birth date young, restrictions, training wheels, class, nah, ain't got none. All that kind of good stuff there. And it says on the back, license restrictions: must use blinkers at all times, must have bike phone, must not park in no parking zones, must have air-equipped bike, no riding backwards. That's dangerous for your safety, you know. Mine too. Do not pick up hitchhikers. It's only 1 seat on my bike. Same with my bus. Bus must be inspected by dad. So,
But that's not father. It should say father, right?
well, no, bike must be inspected by dad. That's the material world. He's
Okay.
going to inspect me. So when it comes down to it, you know, and so when they looked at me and I showed them the ID, when they requested ID, they kind of chuckled and said, yeah, okay. I said, I don't have ID. He says, well, what's your name? I said, well, I don't have one of those either. He looks at me and he says, well, everybody's got a name. I said, no, only persons have names. Real men, we have callings. Now, my mom and dad, they've been calling me Keith all my life. And if they got mad at me, they might call me Keith Orland. Now, I hail from the family Little. And I hear I was born around August 20th, 1966. So if they want to write down a legal name, which is the first and last name, I never gave them a first and last name. And if they want to convert it, that's on them. I never gave them a birth date. I gave them the day that I believe I was born on, according to the hearsay rule. So if they want to write it down that I stated that I gave them a birth date, that too would be wrong. And I would make them a fool on the stand. What are you doing converting information? Are you trying to commit forced labor by using or threatening the use or abuse or threatened abuse of a law or legal system in these civil or criminal actions? That's a 20-year sentence. Do you know that?
Holy shit.
Yeah. You want to look at that, folks? This is plain writing, folks. If you think I'm playing games, 18 U.S.C. 1589, and when we look at subsection C, 18 U.S.C. 1589, it says forced labor. Anything, even the making you present an identification to use or threaten to use a law or legal system, is abuse or threatened abuse of a law or legal system because it's forced labor. In this section, the term abuse or threatened abuse of law or legal process means the use or threatened use of a law or legal process, whether administrative, civil, or criminal, in any manner or for any purpose for which the law was not designed, in order to exert pressure on another person to cause that person to take some action or refrain from taking some action. So, unless you are admitting that you are a resident of the zone, they have a presumption of the facts only. And when you present yourself as a resident of the zone, they get to do whatever they want because you are playing that you have a contract with them in that law or legal system to follow that code, which tells us that you must too be insane to believe that that definition right there has any application other than to express the insanity. It's literally telling you the use or threatened use of a legal or lawful system. Let's look at that again. The term abuse or threatened abuse of law or legal process means the use or threatened use of a law or legal process. And when we read that backwards, because it's synonymous, you read it backwards and now it says the use or threatened use of a law or legal process means the use or means the abuse or threatened abuse of a law or legal process. Why would it be a violation of such thing? Are you familiar with the scripture that says, my yea is my yea, my nay is my nay? And in order for them to use a law or legal process against me, there must be a harmed party. There must be somebody that suffered a loss, damage, or injury to which they could placate some kind of a debt.
Right. Question for you. When you, if they get you to admit that you're a resident of the zone, you basically are saying that you are working for them, right?
Absolutely. Under Federal Code 19 U.S.C. 810, it says no person shall. Okay, I'm back. We clear? We clear?
We're clear. I thought that was
All
me.
right. No, that was me. So under 19 U.S.C. 810, it says no person shall reside within the zone. And that zone is the zoning improvement code or zoning improvement plan wherein they use the zip code. Of which consequently I just got a dismissal of contempt of court charges on that jury service thing. But they use, that's that zoning improvement plan, and that's the zip code. And when you use their property, such as their forms, their envelopes, their deceitful envelopes. See, when you were in English class, they taught you to fill out an envelope in the proper form. They taught you an address went on the envelope in the top right corner, and another address went over here underneath the postage. Okay, So this portion of the address block is not correct. Okay? So when they put the form in the address, it's their form, it's their cargo, it's their envelope, it's their information, and they're the ones that are obfuscating the law, and you're the ones that's not picking up on it because you don't know how to read.
Well, I know
When you
exactly what
learn
you're
how to
talking
read,
about because I remember the day that I was taught how to do a letter, like you're
yeah.
saying, and there was no clear. I don't even think it's right to have, supposed to have that, or am I wrong?
Well, there's a reason to have it, but for you to be using it that way without knowledge of how it's meant to be used and what it's actually declaring on it, when you use a legal name with a street name that's been securitized by the municipal corporation that you're claiming to be a representative of as a resident, claiming to be a federal, state, or municipal officer or agent whose resident presence is deemed necessary by the board when that's never happened. And now you're sitting there fulfilling the obligations and other securities by signing all of those insurance policies and amending them. And those insurance policies that you're amending to be the surety. That's the scheme. That street name that's been securitized, that's the bonding number that goes with it. You know, the number. 420 Arcadia Street. 420 is the bonding number. Guess who owns that number? Postal Service. It's the Postal Service's Real Estate Investment Trust. So they're the ones that bonds it in the number. Guess who owns the Social Security card? Social Security Administration. It's their number that bonds the legal name. Okay? So now you have the municipality that has a contract with the Postal Service for a securitization process, and they're using the resident under the Social Security Administration that's claiming he's a resident as the surety to commit all these transactions in that name, and he doesn't know the first thing about it. What do you think about that, Danielle?
I believe that I want to get away from that kind of stuff. I know that much.
Signing. Quit signing. I can't sign. Far as I know, the first book of the Bible, Book of Enoch, chapter 69, verses 8 through 11, tell me the story of the angel Penniman and how he taught men how to write, and that was the downfall of men. And that in truth, that the men are created in the same conscript as the angels, and we don't need to read and write. And again, so I refer to the Bible scripture that says, my yea is my yea, my nay is my nay.
That would be Matthew 5:32 through 35.
There you go. We are blessed to have another brother that knows scripture. Hang on, Moose. It could be a good ride. Let's get back to it.
Hey, brother, I'm not even gonna try to pretend to tell you that I know that because I haven't picked up a Bible in 10, 15 years, to be honest with you.
I'm telling you, brother, them scriptures are the key. Isaiah 22:22, the key of the house of David I will lay upon his shoulder, and he shall open and no one shall shut. He shall shut and no one shall open.
So, one, I strongly suggest that if you are going to pick up the Bible, get one that has Strong's Concordance with it. Two,
Correct.
fun fact, since you brought up the key of David, if you look up the etymology of David or the key of David, it's the key of love. That's what scripture is all about, is love for your fellow human being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the importance of looking up the meanings of all these names. That's why I say if you look up Jacob's ladder and realize that he named his 12 sons.
I want to let you know why I haven't read the scriptures and stuff, and why I kind of went away from the church is because I was in the church when I was younger, and I was going through all the motions, and I happened to be into a church that had some child predators, and a few of my friends were they were captured up into that act, and so it completely like turned me off to all that stuff, and I started rebelling and rebelling and rebelling, and it's not until recently, the past 2 years, that I've finally there's people trying to push
Are
you
we
away
still there?
from reading the scripture, especially when, yeah,
Okay.
sorry about that. You didn't hear me then. Well, go ahead. It's just I just think that people that they're pushing us away from reading the Bible because they have a lot of these people that are evil in the churches and stuff. And so when I went to church and I went to fellowship and stuff, and then I saw my friends who ended up getting they got molested and stuff by the teacher. Um, I had a big falling away, and so I looked at the church as like, oh my God, this is just trying to control our minds, and this is just these people are evil and stuff. And so now it's like I'm 38, 37 years old, and I'm looking back and I'm like, holy shit! Like my whole life could have been it could have been different. I could have been free a long time ago, and so I'm actually here with the I really want to learn this shit.
Uh, I'm on the different spectrum of that, actually.
Yeah, you've got plenty of time left in front to um, do what you need to set things right. So don't ever let that get you down. Go ahead, brother.
Moose, I can relate, but on the opposite side of the spectrum. In my life, I grew up in satanic cult ritual stuff with sexual child rape. That happened to me as a child, and I never went and found like my way to a church either because of all the evil stuff, like you said, and then furthermore, the which denomination or which religion is the one true religion, like how do we know, and all that stuff. And that's when I started reading the scripture for myself, and then going even deeper and reading the etymology. And if you do that, I guarantee you will have a whole different outlook on what the scriptures say. If you retranslate the first two chapters, just the first two chapters, it will paint a whole different picture of what everyone has been teaching, what these churches are teaching. For one example, nowhere in scripture does it teach that after we die, we get reunited with our loved ones in heaven. What scripture states, this earth will be completely destroyed and a new earth will come down, and we still won't go to heaven where he is in his spiritual form. We'll be with Yeshua in his new body that he created, that we're all supposed to get and live with him for 1,000 years apiece before we get back to heaven.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of the stuff is left out of the scriptures when it comes to the various different churches and stuff, and the way they preach, and it's based upon their own interpretation, and a lot of that's lacking because of a public education system again that doesn't get into the etymologies and stuff, and so they teach them to just go ahead and interpret it according to what they comprehend through English, and that's a very poor source. So let's get back into it. We're going to go back here to Wikipedia. The program is designed to facilitate the interstate exchange of criminal history records. Among state justice agencies. So what I want to point out here is the use of the state justice agencies. Again, that's FBI, and FBI is regulated by the Department of Justice. Now the CIA, they are regulated by the Department of Defense. That's for national security. Now, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, it happens to be, of course, that Homeland Security has greater regulation on the domestic soil than the FBI. Just so you know. And again, that's pertinent to the residency issue here, because that's who you address for the misidentification. It's a matter of redressing that First Amendment, freedom of association, right to petition the government for redress of grievance. The grievance is that they've been using a franchise name, the legal name, and using it through conversions along with its legal number attached to it, the Social Security number, by conversions, and creating a set of records that is in fact not only impossible, but needs to be corrected, because the record is supposed to reflect accurately. And we'll see that later on. That's one of the intents of the thing, is to have privacy and accuracy in the record. It goes to confidentiality. This is the espionage laws, trading with the enemy, and the very reason that they placate that you're supposed to have an identification is to make sure that they're not trading with an enemy. Well, then you damn well better make sure you know exactly who the fuck you're talking about, and I ain't your fucking bitch. In addition to the interstate exchange, this index holds millions of fingerprint identification cards for criminals who have committed a serious enough crime to go to jail for over 24 hours. Search results from the Triple I give a list of states that have a criminal history on a given person. An investigator or analyst may then query those states directly to get specific criminal history, either through the National Law Enforcement Telecommunications System or by other means. So we see that the Interstate Identification Index, the fingerprint system and everything, that's all part of the National Law Enforcement Telecommunications Systems. Okay? So we're finding out through the research here that as you go up the chain, who's regulating what? This would be the authoritative system to go to, and in that system, they have the Interstate Identification System, the Fingerprint Identification System, the National Identification System, various different things. This makes the criminal justice system of each participating state no longer a completely closed system. There goes the sovereignty of the state, right? Oops. See, what's going on is they're sharing records of national importance with other states, folks, when it's the states that have the sovereignty. And like I spoke of on the stateless video the other day, if you're claiming that you're a United States citizen and a resident of the state, then you are considered a stateless being, and they will do with those records what they will, because you are stateless and can't state what needs to be stated. It's obviously true because you haven't stated it yet. So let's look at the next one. Any questions or comments on that one, guys? Before we go on to the next.
No, sir.
I'll take that as a no from
I'm just soaking it in slow.
All right. So the next one is the Interstate Identification Index. FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin. So the Interstate Identification Index, much like the fingerprint index that the FBI has, they have the Interstate Identification Index as well. It says right here in CJ number 97484 journal FB. And remember, I talked about journals and ledgers here lately too. So this is a journal. So it's basically just information. There's no intrinsic value in it. It's just a document of information. And it says FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin, Volume 54, Issue 1, dated January 1985. So it's been promulgated a long time ago. 1985 is when I graduated high school. That's a long time ago, folks. Over 35 years. So, length 4 pages. It says annotation. The Interstate Identification Index, whereby states are primarily responsible for record keeping and dissemination of national crime information center data, has been tested successfully in 2 development phases. Says abstract, the 333 system now involves 20 state identification bureaus. Remember I told you it's about bureaus. When the NCIC receives an online request for a record originating in one of these states, it automatically sends a message to the state computer. Now remember what I told you about the blockchain the other day. It's a duplicating system. So when one of the states enters information into the electronic bookkeeping system, the electronic record, it automatically sends a message to the state computer, and the state computer then disseminates it directly to other responses anywhere in the nation. And if somebody's looking for a fingerprint, it's going to go into that file and search it as soon as it hits the record. So it's operating from both sides. So not only is the state creating the record and setting it there for their files, but because of these different intrastate compacts, they get to search other states' records. So as soon as that hits, if there's an ongoing fingerprint search, it's going to search that file too. So it's not just a matter of information that the state generates, but it's the information that it can disseminate to other compact states. So it just goes by request. There's no regulation. It's just by request. Records in the NCIC are supported by information on a criminal fingerprint card completed at the time of arrest. So this is tying both of those things together. The Interstate Identification Index, where you have that interstate identification that you hand to the nice policy officer. Now if he arrests you, now he's going to correlate that to the criminal record and fingerprint you. Okay? The use of III has increased by over 25% during the last year, and now over 500,000 inquiries are processed each month. Okay? So it's people literally out there looking for all this information that's put out there through that identification system itself. And it's that identification system itself that's putting you in the position to be a criminal because you don't know what you're doing. You're making a false claim of residency. You're claiming to be a contract officer required. Let's look at 12 U.S.C. 411 and see the comparable status of performing the functions of. Because it goes to everything that's issued, those state securities, those documents that they have you sign, those are issued by some kind of state agency or official. So it's a state issue, and then it's relative to the same thing as an issuance to reserve banks, nature of the obligation, redemption. So it's the same thing as a issuance to a resident, nature of their obligation, and indemnification or redemption, same thing, indemnification. So this has to do with insurance. So again, the nature of the obligation is you're taking over the insurance as a resident by undertaking the issuance. You took it under a presumption. That's an undertaking. And then you signed it as that undertaker. You're the one killing yourself, people. So, Federal Reserve notes to be issued at the discretion of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System for the purpose of making advances to Federal Reserve banks. No one else. You will never see it mention anything else. Through the Federal Reserve's agents as hereinafter set forth and for no other purpose are authorized. So they're used to make advances to Federal Reserve banks through Federal Reserve agents. And it says the said notes shall be obligations of the United States, shall be receivable by all national banks and Federal Reserve banks, and for all taxes, customs, and other public dues. Don't you get it? Well, it looks like we lost Danielle, so the link is clipped, or pinned, so anybody can join.
I think he'll be back. Even I'm having some weird internet issues right now.
Well, yeah, I get cut out myself too. It's Friday or Saturday night, high usage, and they do a cutback on the download time, so you end up with stuttered video. Anyway, he is back. And Talcott clip collection. Thank you. Correct again. The process of false probate, Steve Martin mentioned on Paul's show just a little bit ago, was talking about the results of an unlawful conversion of your name and estate assets. And that's because most people are claiming to be a private citizen and, a resident. And in fact, they're of a private capacity and don't know how to express that. So let's look at the next one. NCIC, Interstate Identification Index, System Security. So again, when I said the Interstate Identification Index, the fingerprint, the National Identification Index, all of that is under that NCIC, and that is Office of Justice Programs under the U.S. Department of Justice. So, as it says, annotation, this instructional videotape with 2 accompanying video facilitator guides. Remember, we spoke also on Paul's show earlier that these are just guiding principles. These are not laws. You need to get this through your thick skulls. Read it. Learn how to read. These are not laws. It says this instructional videotape with 2 accompanying video facilitator guides provide law enforcement and criminal justice personnel with basic knowledge of National Crime Information Center policy and procedures. Expertise in NCIC operations will result in more efficient and effective criminal justice operations. Criminal justice operations done under the Administration of Investigations. These are military venues, folks. Help reduce liability, letting them know that they hold liability already. They're not placing it anybody else. They just say help reduce liability in their own shit. They're not naming any other outside agency. They're not naming the people. It will help them reduce their liability would be a better way to state that. But just so you know, you can read that without reading it. It's in between the lines because they don't state anything else. And assist in creating a safer environment for the entire criminal justice community. Okay? They have to fight for their lives. They have to fight for their jobs. If they can't help enforce this upon an idiotic slavery, then they lose their job because the slavery's not so idiot, or is not so full of idiots, and therefore they escape their binds and chains. Oops. Anytime you must obtain the criminal history record of a subject. The subject matter is what now, folks? Can anybody answer this?
Can you say the question one more time?
What is the subject matter?
They're trying to protect their liabilities, which is basically the slaves.
So, the slave, right?
Yeah, they're like Uncle Toms, and they're keeping the slaves in check. That's their job, and that's their liability, right?
So it's the material matter that's subject to the slavery. So it's the body, right?
But I thought
The
we were
one that
dead at
wants.
sea.
Well, if the subject matter is about the slavery, they want to keep their slaves, and you're the actual slave, you're the actual subject matter. Well, what's the deal with the subject matter? Do you remember Kunta Kinte in Roots when they tried to tell him his name was Toby?
Yeah, he said, "No way, my name is K.I.N.T.S."
Right. So whose name do you accept? Do you accept the state's slave name? Do you accept the mom's given name? Mom gave you a name. That's the given name. Like I said earlier, I don't have a legal name. Those are for persons. Real men, we have callings. Mom called me Keith all my life.
Right. My name would be Michael Andrew then.
Well, yeah. Well, I wouldn't even claim it as a name. Persons have names. Real
My
men
calling.
have callings. And Mom and Dad called me Keith all my life. Now, if they got mad at me, they might call me Keith Orland. And that's as simple as it gets. Why do you need a last name? Let me ask everybody. Does God have a last name? How come nobody wants to talk about that? They want to talk about the name of God, but nobody ever talks about a first name and a last name, a given name, family name. Nobody ever wants to bring that into his name, huh? Why? How are we an image and likeness if we're taking upon those kinds of things? Isn't that a delineation of that God? Hallowed be thy name. You can call me anything you want.
Okay, what is his name? Because God is just a title. That's not his actual name.
Correct.
That's another
So,
thing that people don't understand either. They think his name is actually God, but no, that's just a title. There are also many other gods. So why are you calling out to God for help when that's not his name?
right.
Mm.
They placed a title to define that which was fine to begin with without even needing to be mentioned.
They bastardized it, basically, right? Would that be the right way to say it?
Absolutely, and that comes from believing that you have to express it when your actions already do that. Your acceptance of a God is automatically expressed in your actions. This is where we get our cultural heritages. This is why people do the wampum rain dances and the drumming African chants and all of this. This is why they do their music. Their music is a vibration that represents a cultural existence as well as a semblance or a what do they call it signifying their presence, so that tribe to tribe they could talk to each other just like smoke signals. They could do it through sound vibrations and this and that, and so we get this concept of having to greater express those kinds of things. So we create different languages. And that's where we're at. We're creating languages that are confusing and helping other people take advantage of other people. This is the taking profit off of the loss of another man. And it's all done through the use of the words. That's why they need it for commerce. Merchant. It's a mercy chant. The struggling man that can't survive on his own, and he comes across a merchant. He's hollering out about his wares. Come get a nice new robe. You look dusty and dirty, you old slave. It's only 10 pence. Come get you a nice clean one. You know, and they're at the same time they're enticing you into that sale. They're calling you a slave, and you just don't know it. So let's get back to it. Excuse me. Records for over 15 million serious criminals are available within minutes. Care should be taken interpreting the record. See, and this is the problem. Everybody wants to interpret the record their own way instead of the way it's actually designed. Like I said, the enumeration at birth is an agreement between the national government, the federal government, the National Security Department of Defense, and a state official to assign a Social Security number to a newborn individual. Okay? The assignment is attached to the newborn individual, and the individual is identified by a legal name, which is a first and last name put together as a translation by the Social Security Administration from an abstract, what they call here an abstract of information that mom signed as an informant that gave a given name, a second name, and a family name. And like I said, the Social Security Administration translates it. They admit to it in their own Social Security Administration PALMS manual, Programs Operations Manual, and that they translate it to a legal name consisting of the first name and last name. And those are bastardizations. I don't need a last name. I don't need a surname. Hell, I don't even need a first name. I don't need a given name. Prince proved this with a symbol, again, signifying something. So it comes to the significance of what it's truly saying and what it means, what its intent is. It's ridiculous that people don't understand the intent of our Father which art in heaven is totally different than that of that military hospital that we keep going to have our babies at without clarifying and memorializing the herald of a legacy heir.
That's one of the biggest things that I honestly regret not learning this stuff sooner is signing that birth certificate.
Well, just because you signed it doesn't mean you can't fix it. Again, it's data elements that were entered into a system in error. Again, that system is not meant to have any data elements entered into it by anybody but a trustee. And what happens is, even though you're not a trustee, there's a conversion that enters you as a trustee. And this is what needs to be stopped. Again, it's an accident under 49 CFR 387.5, I believe it is. It says accident, continuous and repeated exposure to the same conditions. And each and every last one of us was conditioned in public education school at 5 years of age to write our legal name and not the given name and family name in its proper grammatical construct according to English, concise English. We were instructed in a bastardized form to write the legal name and, of course, enforced to ensure that we would remember not just mom and dad and the phone number, but the address where we live too. It's all perverse.
And they teach you how to sign, like I think it's second grade or third grade. And ever since then, you sign and sign and sign and sign, and you're not supposed to sign, is what you were saying.
Well, yeah, it's cursive. We can't hear you, Danielle. Different mic or something. But yeah, it's cursive, and what you're actually doing is you're cursing your own writing. English isn't meant. Cursive is a grammatical stylization, and it is not true English. Same with the upper and lowercase letters. Originally, English was all lowercase, just like Latin was all uppercase. Go ahead, Danielle. Try again.
Can you hear me?
There we go. We got you now.
I forgot what I was going to say because of that.
Well, I was talking about cursive, how you learn cursive at like second or third grade, and you sign your name.
They actually removed cursive from schools.
Yeah. Here recently, I think, yeah, in the last few years.
Long before that. My son is 16 now, and he's got a year and a half left of school. And they never learned. He's never touched cursive in public school.
So how do they get them to sign?
By signing their name in regular print.
Yeah, see, it doesn't have to be a signature. Again, when you go back to the words and everything and how it's written, it's all you have to do is leave a mark.
Yeah,
So
I was just about to say, all you got to do is just, even if you leave a mark, that can be considered a signature.
Yeah. So let's get back to it. We got the next one, Interstate Identification Index National Fingerprint File. We got a map here for you folks. We're going to show you how they work together. This Interstate Identification Index National Fingerprint File as of October 25th, 2023. And it says the III participation is only 25 states, or participation only is in 25 states. So these 25 blue states are participating in the Interstate Identification Index only. Okay. These here, the yellow ones, are III National Fingerprint File participation. So these guys participate in both of them. But the thing is that these states here, with all the interstate compacts, they can access all of these other states' fingerprint files and import them into theirs. So that's what they do. Again, it's a blockchaining system that doesn't matter where the information is entered. Anybody that has access to it is going to request it, and boom, now they've got a duplicate file. So that if somebody from one of these other states comes in as a criminal and they can identify them, boom, they can lock them up in Nebraska. Rather, even if they've got an Iowa ID, they can lock them up in Nebraska and still access that probated estate from Iowa. That's what it's about. It's that Interstate Identification Index. And again, it's related to that Social Security account. That Vital Statistics Bureau is the state's vital statistics jurisdiction that was created for each individual that is born in the state. And it's an exclusive jurisdiction to each individual. It's a personal jurisdiction, and the person was created by the state. So the state placates that they have personal jurisdiction, which might be fine and dandy if that's truly so in that manner. But if they're trying to say that you're the person or the representative of the person, then they still can't get personal jurisdiction unless you admit that person. In other words, you have to have the record of that person, holding that record and hand it over to them like that license. Then you are acting as a representative agent of that person. And that's all it takes. So I keep urging everybody to learn about that identification and what it's doing. And it's an Interstate Identification Index. The index is a group of identifications within the interstate. Interstate is the commercial contracts. Those are the Title 4D contracts through Social Security. And that's what they're identifying, is the contractor.
Sorry, folks. We lost Wizard momentarily. He will be right back when he is done freezing.
By each III participating state into a national system. And like I showed you earlier, they're all accessing that national system. And then in that national system, they can choose from participation only, III, or from the III and NNFF. Okay. And there's only 5 non-participants, and those are territories and not states. Okay. Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, can't remember what MK is in VI, but Virgin Island. So this system serves as the vehicle. Remember, I told you there's more than one kind of vehicle, right? This is a vehicle. It's a communication. It's a way to transport an idea. Okay? You catching on? This system serves as the vehicle for data sharing and integration across the country. Now remember what I told you about 19 CFR 149.3 data elements. if you're considered a buyer or a seller or a shipped party, you know, the one that's supposed to be at the final destination receiving the benefit as the benefactor to the beneficiary and all that. If you're supposed to be the receiver on that end, you're allowed to use a widely recognized, commercially identifiable number in lieu of the name and address. So what is the importance of the name and address? Again, like I've been saying, you use that name and address together, and that's playing that you're a contractor on a Title 4D contract, acting as a personal representative for the person, and don't know it. And you're incompetent, and they prove it every time. 94 fucking cases. They tried to drag my name in there and prove that I'm incompetent. And granted, some of them, they found me guilty here and there because I wasn't competent of the language yet, but I knew there was something wrong. I knew I wasn't supposed to be in those courts. Okay? Now that we know it's the identification, that won't happen anymore. Not by my means anyway. The NFF program, the final phase of III implementation. Implementation, again, that's 48 CFR 52.212-5, contract terms and conditions required to implement statutes or executive orders. And again, they said this is a vehicle, serves as a vehicle. Vehicle being commercial, again, implementation of commercial items or commercial services, is decentralization via the National Fingerprint File Program. So they're going to decentralize by sharing it out with everybody. That's what decentralization is. It's the dissemination of the information to everybody else. The NFF program places the management and responsibility for the effective control, collection, maintenance, and dissemination of state criminal record files solely with the state. Remember what we talked about stateless. If you're going to claim a resident of a state, then you're classified as a stateless being because you are clarifying that supposedly you're a United States citizen but no longer live in the United States. Now you're a resident of the state. And then on all those forms that the state asks you for, and a lot of them, they're going to ask you if you're a United States citizen. You say you're a United States citizen, then you give a state for an address. Funny thing how you lie. The NFF states respond to record requests for all authorized purposes, and the FBI ceases to maintain duplicate criminal records. A state must ratify the National Crime Prevention and Privacy Compact of 1998, 34 U.S. Code 40311 through 40316, before it can join the NFF program. So a state must ratify the National Crime Prevention and Privacy Compact Act. Goodness gracious, that sounds like a contract. You understand that, folks? So the Interstate Identification Index, the fingerprint file, and all that, those are all contracts. And by you subjecting yourself to them, you are entering into a contract to be a contract officer, and you're not qualified. Is that what you guys get out of it? Because that's what I get out of it. All the stuff that I brought up. And yes, we spoke about this earlier too. It's about being the law of the land. See, they don't want you to be recognizing of the law of the land, because God formed man of the dust of the ground, and when he breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, man became a living soul. And their agriculture, Title 7, dependent upon all of the agriculture, their commerce, it's dependent upon all the agriculture, gross domestic product and all that, commodities and all that. Their definition under 136, 7 U.S.C. 136 is animal includes man. So I want to ask you, can you require an animal to have identification and carry it on him as he's traveling down the road or across the land? Either place. Or maybe he's swimming across the pond and you think he might be fishing, or maybe he's a what do they call those poachers? Maybe he's poaching or something. You need to require him to get his ID out. Show that he's not poaching that damn walnut he's over there eating. You know? What about that beaver? What's he doing? Is he constructing that dam in a safe manner according to building code? Is he required to have that license? Is he required to have a contract and insurance and sign a registration and hand that thing over so you can protect him? You pose his protection of wildlife and fisheries, and wildlife and fisheries includes animals, right? So why aren't you protecting me? See, this is all so insane in my mind. What about you guys? Does that make sense at all? Tell me honestly, can you license an animal?
They try to have you license your dog and shit, but none of that shit makes sense to me. I mean, none of it. Like how they push this shit through. Like none of it. I get, when you're breaking it down, I understand that part, but I don't understand how we've gotten this far.
Well, yeah, it's that public education system. It's so great. It's what makes this country great, guys. We got a bunch of idiots running around. That's how it happens.
You know who taught the birth certificate and Bill of Rights and all that stuff? Do you know who taught that to our founding fathers?
Probably some publicist over in New England. Tell us.
It was actually the Moorish Empire.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Wasn't there 6 presidents before George Washington?
Yes and no. It could be. The term president was that not the word that was used back then when they were trying to do everything. It eventually turned into that. But yeah, there were other leaders before George Washington. But in order to finalize everything that the Moorish people taught them, that's why he is considered the first president, because that's where the country became a country. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in order for a country to be considered a country, another country has to step forward and publicly announce to the world they recognize them as a country. And when the United States did that, it was the Moorish Empire that was the first people to reach out and publicly declare to the world that the United States is a country. And because of that, that's where the first treaty was signed, and that's how how they learned to create what is today. And then you can take it even a step further. If you look up the flag of the flag of the Moorish people, it's the Star of David. They're Jews.
It's all been designed over eons before Jews even. Okay, it just so happens that when Judaism came about, they had a recognition again through that polity of King Cyrus that declared the Jews had their own religion. Okay, this was also somebody else recognizing a different faith. Okay, just like the Moors recognizing another country. So Judaism started out, and we have the Jews that just simply took over the money system as they saw it, that they have a supposed inherited right. And I think that's kind of blasphemous too, again, when you're pushing this monetary system of wants and desires when the scripture says you're not supposed to want. So I don't care what you want to claim. I don't care if you want to claim resident, Islam, Catholic, Christian, Jews, whatever. I really don't, because unless you can really bring the truth about things, then I really don't think you've been well enough educated, because I'm going to bring a lot of good questions. I think I do bring a lot of good questions and information forward that shows that maybe people really aren't thinking about this too much. Or maybe those that are thinking about it so much and putting so much out as far as theological aspects, maybe you ought to calm it down and turn that burner down and get over the Dunning-Kruger effect. So
Moose, did you know any of that?
I knew that the Moors were the ones that found the country, but I didn't know that another country had to recognize a new country as a country, and I did not know the extent of it.
That's why they made a big deal about Israel because it was the United States that was the first country to recognize them as a country.
I also didn't know that
it
the
was a quid
original
quo
Jewish
pro.
people were Moorish people, or of that melanated skin.
I will say this: Yah made man out of the African dust. If that goes against your theology, I imagine that's rough.
It doesn't bother me at all. I'm intrigued by this stuff, and I've been trying to find people to talk about this stuff and learn more about it. But there's a lot of people who they just shut down when you try to discuss anything that is not mainstream. They just shut their brain off on you.
In the book of Enoch, I believe chapter 106, this is when Enoch is with his son Methuselah, because Methuselah just gave his wife just gave birth to his firstborn son, which is Noah, and everyone was completely scared because they didn't know what was going to happen, because they described what Noah looked like, and in that description, everyone was a certain melanated color. And Noah was the first white/albino person, and that's where white people come from. Everyone in the world is black.
Yep, and people don't get that, and that's why I have this little giggle in the back of me whenever I hear white people trying to be racist, because they don't understand that out of the premise, even scientifically, is proven that it's the black woman that has a white baby, not a white woman that has black babies. It's never been possible.
How can
because yeah, she says, how can that be verified? Well, because melanation is a dominant trait.
Yeah.
And later, I mean, this is probably not for this stream, but maybe another one. But the Civil War, there's something about the Civil War that tells me that it's not what they were telling us about. And I do believe that there had to be something with the Moorish people. And I think it was more of like an invasion rather than...
There was an invasion from the north and the south. One from the Spanish from the south.
And it was about being able to control the port. And then, of course, all that was absconded mere 40 years later or so, in the early 1900s, with the Panama Canal. Because now that solved the whole problem with everything there. Even though the Gulf port was still important, the Panama Canal was the main goal to begin with. In case you didn't understand that. If the power resided in America, then America's the one that's going to win the contract. Remember, it's maritime, folks. So they're going to win the contract for that Panama Canal. That's what the Civil War was about. The Southern wanted to keep their ports for their exports and everything. You keep it separate from the Northern ports. Well, they needed to cooperate and put those ports together, and that meant they had to kind of uniform the taxation and the slavery and all of that. And that was the real issue, in my opinion, of course. So, back to the FBI's Interstate Identification Index. Says observations on the FBI's Interstate Identification Index. And it's just a little note, says, in response to a congressional request, Government Accountability Office examined the status and implementation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Interstate Identification Index, which is an automated information system That means it's not manual, as according to the definitive paperwork, but there is a manual operation through that paperwork that then once it's entered into the electronic book entry system, now it's automated. It's an automated dissemination. It's an automated decentralization. If you want to remain the authority in your life, quit decentralizing it by putting it into these other information systems that you don't belong in. Used to exchange criminal history records and related information. So it's not just the criminal history records and related information, height, weight, medical conditions, tattoos, right-handed, left-handed, male, female. Did you graduate high school? Did you get any further education? Every statistical data element there is. States, vital, statistic, jurisdiction. Okay? And here's that code that they spoke of in the previous one. An Interstate Identification Index means a cooperative federal state system. So again, like I said, in order for there to be a cooperative system, it's a contract. They already have a contract set up. Okay, just like the post office has a contract set up with the local municipality for that street name to be securitized and bonded with their number in their enumeration system, the real estate investment trust that they operate.
So basically, when they say it's all business, it's all business.
It's all business. The next one, now this is the National Crime Prevention and Privacy Act, the other one they mentioned in there. And this one here, I want you to pay attention because it's going to tell you the obligation of the parties. Now, in the obligation of the parties, do these obligations extend beyond these parties, or do they remain with these parties? Under this compact, the FBI and the party states agree to maintain detailed database of their respective criminal history records, including arrests and dispositions. Did you know, folks, a disposition is the transfer of property? Did you know that the transfer of property can't be done except by requirement of the military? It first must be required by the military for somebody to dispossess you or disposition you from your property. That military requirement has to be done through an inquiry in order for them to acquire it, and it also must be compensated for. And to make them available to the federal government. So they're going to acquire the property for the federal government, and it is property. See, this information that you're giving out is your property. And to party states for authorized purposes. Remember the vital statistics record that I showed you, the graph? And they've got over 500 agencies nationwide that have access to these records for their purposes. The FBI shall also manage the federal data facilities that provide a significant part of the infrastructure for the system. So it's the FBI that manages the federal data facilities under 19 U.S.C. 81.0 resident and 19 CFR 149.3, wherein you can give a number in lieu of a name and address. So which one do you want? What data facility do you want them to use, and what data do you want them to use? If you want them to keep using that name and address, you keep giving them that name and address and not doing your research to find out what number you can give in lieu of a name and address. I guarantee you it's constructed in trust, so you better learn to know which trust number to give. The one on the front for public liability, the one on the back for private pass-through. I don't know. Maybe you ought to do your research. Anyway, the FBI shall also manage the FBI data facilities that provide a significant part of the infrastructure for the system. So again, they're telling you, also manage the federal data facilities that provide a significant part of the infrastructure for the system. and they wouldn't need those data facilities if you didn't give them all the data. Okay? They'd still have the need for data facilities, but your data wouldn't be going through those data facilities in such an amount that they need to get more and more servers because you want to keep yapping your jaws off. Article 1 in this compact, Attorney General, so we have one member. The Attorney General means the Attorney General of the United States. Compact officer, the term compact officer means with respect to the federal government, an official so designated by the director of the FBI. And with respect to a party state, the chief administrator of the state's criminal history record repository, or a designee of the chief administrator who is a regular full-time employee of the repository. That identification is an instrument of that said repository. Counsel is part of the Interstate Identification Index. It's for commercial purposes for contract officers under Title 4D contracts. Counsel, the term counsel means the compact counsel established under Article 6. Criminal history records, the term criminal history records means information collected by criminal justice agencies on individuals consisting of identifiable descriptions and notations of arrests, detentions, indictments, or other formal criminal charges and any disposition arising therefrom, including acquittal, sentencing, correctional supervision, or release, and does not include identification information such as fingerprint records if such information does not indicate involvement of the individual with criminal justice system. So it's basically saying everything but the fingerprint records. You go to the hospital. Again, I've showed you this many times before. You go to the hospital and you fill out a document form at the emergency room. Mine particularly, right at the top, says sales agreement. On that sales agreement, it even places a term, a condition of the contract, that the customer agrees to make third-party payments so long as the customer, so long as credit is given to the customer's account. So there are certain contract terms and conditions that when you recognize them for your benefit, you're able to use them, and you got to realize where they're at. And when you're in the emergency room, you have to have a solid enough head on your shoulders to realize that you need to read the paper. You can't be so extremely out of it and so emotional that you lose your cognitive thought process and just go flippant insane and become a babbling idiot. You look at the document, it says sales agreement, you treat it as a sales agreement.
Is there a way to get your name off, your fingerprints off that list?
Not sure yet. I doubt it. They call it expunging a record, but the record will always remain. But what they do is they declassify it, and it no longer becomes part of the searchable parameters. It's kind of like wiping a laptop and then resetting it. The old one is still there. You can still get into the program files and still read the shadow of it.
It's called the metadata.
Right. So let's look at the next one. What do I have? Oh, yeah. The vital records thing that I was showing you. I've showed you folks this one before. And this is, like I said, it's from the creation of the state's vital statistics jurisdiction. Current birth registration process for a state vital records jurisdiction. Now, the state creates a state vital records jurisdiction upon the birth of every individual that gets entered into the system, and that is excluded.
He froze again. Oh, I guess while we wait for him to come back, you got any questions so far, Moose?
No, I mean, this is take
Most
in.
certainly be different.
Welcome back, Wizard. You broke up there. You froze.
For how long?
About a good 40 seconds. As soon as you just transition to that slide, basically.
Okay. So here we have the graph from the state's vital statistics, vital records jurisdiction, and that's at Bureau of Vital Statistics. So what we have is all these federal agencies and stuff that are allowed to access this information, and it says many users on here, and this is the birth registration. The next one is the death registration, and down here it tells you in 20 users, federal and state government 20 users, approximately 20 users. Federal and state government, private sector. So this would be the public sector. This is private sector. So even in the private sector, they're giving private sector private sector people information about you, your records. Healthcare researchers. Remember, it's all about research. It's all about practice. It is an experiment. Academic institutions, researchers, healthcare organizations, etc. Many users. Federal benefits payment agencies, that's the CMS, Department of Defense, Department of State. And then, of course, the LIDMF certified users is greater than 500. Okay. So there's a lot of people out there using this, and this is the death registration. Now, this is in relations to what we were talking about earlier on Paul's 2 with Steve Martin. We mentioned the burial trust. That's what's established at the birth, is the burial trust. It's a trust operation, and what we're dealing with here is a probated estate upon the enumeration at birth, so that if you somehow pass away before you turn 18, the state is holding an obligation under that trust that they established to go ahead and provide burial benefits to you. Okay?
Which they never pay out on.
Right. Because what happens, like I said, it's a probated estate, and what they're doing is they're robbing that probated estate before it gets used. This is the insanity of the law, folks. If a state is in probate, it means somebody has passed away. Okay? The deceased is the name in probate. So if they're operating in probate and they're bringing that name against you, and they're attacking the burial trust, you're literally supposed to have been passed away before they can settle anything out of that trust to its creditors. But what's happening is they're placating that their creditors while you're alive, getting you to sign security instruments that they turn around and convert the information to show that they're the creditors, and then that money gets to that stuff gets deposited in the depository trust company. Okay, that deposit is made in their names, and they have access to that credit. But in fact, it's truly your credit. It should be to your credit, but it's not, because you don't know what's going on. The conversion is there. And again, like I said, look at your damn prescriptions. They converted the last name to a firm name and wrote it right up next to your last name. Matter of fact, let me get that. See if they don't use the last name in a military style. Yes. Let me show you here. So this is a prescription, obvious, and you can see that they took and put the first 4 letters of the last name in all uppercase right here, yellow highlight in black lettering, and much larger than the other one. And notice the different size of the types and stuff on this document. You got bold here and different size and everything. So they've got different style grammars. But right here, that name, that's a military style. They've got the surname first, and then the given name. Again, showing that they operate in military fashion. That's Admiralty, folks. You have to have a merchant license to operate as a merchant, a contract officer. You have to have some kind of merchant license of some sort. And that's what your state ID is all about. Interstate Identification Index. You've been grouped into an identification of interstate commercial contractors. The next one, oh, here we go. Now, this is in regards to that the privacy and accuracy of the record. And this is from, what is this? This is page 9, 10. Procedures when it comes to authorized records disclosures. A state criminal history records repository, to the extent authorized by Section 552A of Title V, that's that records maintained on individuals. I've told you about that many times. Commonly known as the Privacy Act of 1974, the FBI shall provide, on request, criminal history records, excluding sealed records, to state criminal history record repositories for non-criminal justice purposes. For non-criminal justice purposes.
Non-criminal.
So without those purposes, they're still disseminating the information. What was that, brother?
Oh, I was just repeating non-criminal. So, like, you don't even have to do anything wrong, and they're just disseminating your shit.
Right. That's the whole purpose of the program, is to decentralize the information so everybody has access to it, so they can invest in it under your nose because you don't. Obviously, because you gave it to them to do so. It's a sick game, I'm telling you.
That's why you're considered a child of the, or a ward of the court, and you're incompetent to handle your own affairs, and that gives them the legal right, according to them, to do what they want with your estate or trust.
Absolutely. And those non-criminal justice purposes allowed by federal statute, federal executive order, or a state statute. Again, remember I talked about that disposition, transfer of property, military necessity requirement, inquire to acquire. That's that Federal Acquisitions Act, 48 CFR 52.212-5, where contract terms and conditions are required to implement statutes or executive orders, commercial items, commercial services, that have been approved by the Attorney General. And remember, we saw the Attorney General was one of the participating compact parties, and that authorizes national indices checks, indices being the indexes. Criminal justice agencies and other governmental or non-governmental agencies. Those are those private ones we were talking about, private sector. The FBI, to the extent authorized by Section 552A of Title V, commonly known as the Privacy Act of 1974, a state criminal history record repository shall provide criminal history records, excluding sealed records, to criminal justice agencies and other governmental or non-governmental agencies for non-criminal justice purposes allowed by. So again, where are the criminal justice purposes, right? You know what I mean? Now it says procedures. Any record obtained under this compact. That's at SS5. Any record obtained under this compact. That's the beginning of that criminal record. That's the beginning of the identification, so they can create a criminal record if they decide they want you to be a criminal. See, they're the ones making the performance, and you will perform as they say. You are the actor, they are the director. And until you learn that you need to learn how to direct your own person and get out of that theatrical play, you will never learn how to stand up and be a man of your own. You will be the Pinocchio you were constructed to be. May be used for only for official purposes for which the record was requested. That's telling us you can request a record for which there are official purposes, and you can only use it for those official purposes according to the compact that allows you to obtain that record. National identification purposes. Well, yeah, we got to have that 5-year-old learn how to write his legal name and the address so we can have him write it down on that identification card as a listing agreement to buy and sell insurances simply by placing his signature on a piece of paper, thereby amending an insurance policy and taking upon the liability of being a surety. Each compact officer shall establish procedures consistent with this compact and with rules, procedures, and standards established by the Council under Article 6, which procedures shall protect. So this is a protection order, and full faith and credit is given to protection orders. Protect the accuracy and privacy of the records. And ensure that records obtained under this compact are used only by authorized officials for authorized purposes. So when they give you that license, you become said authorized official in that compact, and you are using a record for that authorized purpose. That is the use of FRUC, folks. You are using their record system, and you are applying to get an identification for that record system so you can specifically enter the data into that record system. And until you realize that entering the data into that record system is in fact to your detriment, like I said, by endorsing those documents, claiming liability, and becoming surety by amending the insurance contract that underlies that document, because you undertook that underlying. What do you think about that, guys?
It's basically it's our choice to continue to basically give them everything of ourselves and let them rule our lives, or we take control of it and we're not part of that system anymore. But then I'm wondering what happens when you do take it back. I mean, you're still in the system, but you have to tell them who you are because they don't know who you are, right?
Yep. And how many times do you suppose you're going to have to tell somebody who you are if they don't know who you are? Remember John 8 verses 14 through 20. If they think they can't recognize you except through an identification, then they don't know the Father. And that's the first thing I'm going to point out. Again, if you can't come to me in your spiritual presence first, I'm going to know it. I'm going to point it out. And that's where we start when you talk with me.
Well, in my humble opinion, when all that comes into fruition and we're going to have to buckle down, I don't think that's going to matter about you knowing the Father versus them knowing the Father, for the simple fact that the Vatican has already created, I don't know the Latin term off the top of my head, but they just basically decreed a year ago. It's just not being enforced yet. But in a nutshell, it states that if you are not adhering to their terms and definitions of what a Christian is, you are no longer to be considered a Christian.
Yeah, it's going back to the principles again, like Paul says on his streams. the guiding principle is what's going to lead you to the respect. The respect is what's going to lead you to the popularity. Popularity is what's going to lead you to the power. And you can't do it backwards. You just can't, folks. So let's finish reading this real quick. Says, next one says, require that subsequent record checks are requested to obtain current information whenever a new need arises. So every time they create a new need, they just simply request the records. And this is what I was saying about earlier. If all of a sudden somebody puts a bolo out and they're looking for somebody and they send out the fingerprints, anybody that put in new information in that system, that they're going to check even those records to see if the fingerprints might match, see if there's fingerprints in there. Ensure that records entries that may not legally be used for a particular non-criminal justice purpose are deleted from the response. So the information is going to remain in the system, but they can delete it from the response. This is what I think what happens when they do a expungement of the records. Then they get a no response, a no record response. If no information authorized for release remains, an appropriate no record response is communicated to the requesting official. And this is what a lot of people are trying to get, is that expungement of the record. And I don't know if you're going to get that. Next part says positive identification, subject fingerprints. Remember we talked about the subject matter? You are the subject matter. It says right there, subject fingerprints. You're the subject. You're in material form. You are the subject matter. You are attaching a name, and that is used for identification, just like your fingerprints are used for identification. Okay? Or other approved forms of positive identification shall be submitted with all requests for criminal history record checks for non-criminal justice purposes. So like I said, those other forms of identification are known as positive identifications. Why? Because you admitted it. You were the one that went in and applied. You said you were, not them. Again, I agree. Everybody was indoctrinated in the public education system to write that legal name and their address and everything, and weren't taught anything about any of this stuff. So I agree. Yeah, there's some fault somewhere else, but we can't claim that fault or pinpoint it to anybody, because it's a matter of how the system operates, and it's going to continue to happen until people start educating each other. Okay. The next one I've got, let me see here. When it comes to that positive identification, we've got certification of identity. Now, this is from a form approved OMB number 1103-0016, expires 5/31/2023, U.S. Department of Justice. But again, this expiration date, I don't know if I would hold that so much true, because I'm not merely going to use this form at all, other than to interpret, so I could then maybe turn around and write my own statement and use this as a reference to help with the supplemental information that I'm providing, so that they can correlate these different sections and stuff that they're using and how I'm interpreting those sections. Says Privacy Act statement in accordance with 28 CFR 16.41D, personal data sufficient to identify the individual or individuals submitting requests by mail under the Privacy Act. In other words, you are the one requesting it because it's your private entity. If it was a public official, they wouldn't have to use the Privacy Act. 5 U.S.C. Section 552A is required. The purpose of this solicitation, they tell you it's a solicitation, That's why I wouldn't use this form. You're soliciting, okay? That's a commercial endeavor. And that's why it goes to the Office of Management and Budget. But anything that doesn't go through the Office of Management and Budget is something you know is a certain deceptive form for sure. This too is a certain deceptive form, but at least it's got an OMB number, and now you can use this form and go through and do your proofreading just like an English teacher would and correct things. Solicitation, like I said, is to ensure that the records of individuals who are the subject of U.S. Department of Justice systems of records. So it's a U.S. Department of Justice system of records that is created upon a Department of Defense system of records of the enumeration at birth. That's 5 U.S.C. 301, Departmental Regulations, Minimum Birth Registration Requirements, Plain Writing Act, applicable to Department of Defense, and are not wrongfully disclosed by the department. Requests will not be processed if this information is not furnished. False information on this form may subject the requester to criminal penalties under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001 and or 5 U.S.C. Section 552A I3. Public reporting burden. Again, it's a public reporting burden. That means there's an obligation. And if you're not required to report it because you're private, then you don't report it. But if you presume that you're required to report it and you report it, it becomes a public issue. And that's the problem. You have to realize it's reporting upon a public burden. That's the statistics. If you learn how to keep your information out, it ain't none of their business. And they can't use those statistics to manipulate the population as a whole. Because if the population knows they're false because they didn't enter them, then they can't use them against them. For this collection of information is estimated to average 0.5 hours per response, including the time for reviewing instructions. Remember, they're instructions. It's not law, it's instructions. Searching existing data sources to see if it's accurate and can be duplicated and blockchained, gathering and maintaining the data needed, and completing and reviewing the collection of information. Suggestions for reducing this burden may be submitted to the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, Office of Management Budget, Public Use Report Projects. I'll submit mine. Tell your slaves there is no law requiring identification. If you keep pushing this law, sooner or later, enough people will hear people like myself explaining it in plain English. Show me the law that says I have to have an identification, particularly when that identification is created by the state. Does that make sense, guys? This is stuff that we need to be comprehensive about, and the only way we can do it is by learning this stuff. Go ahead, Brother Moose.
Oh, I was gonna say it is coming together for me, but I'm gonna watch the stream over again when I restream it, and I'm gonna be doing some homework on my end, so that way I come through with a little bit more next time.
Awesome. And I'm going to take a moment to reflect on the scriptures again here, Isaiah 43:1 and 44:5, in a verse of a state identification or anything, as well as the passport, Psalms 121:8. I fear not, for I have been redeemed. He has called me by thy name. I am his. And one shall say, I am the Lord's. One shall call himself by the name Jacob. Another shall subscribe with his hand unto the Lord, and surname himself by the name Israel. Psalms 121:8. The Lord shall preserve thy going in and thy going out, or going out and coming in from this time forth.
You should put those scriptures in the chat for the audience.
And yeah, Psalms 121:8, the Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. And again, the purpose and the timing, the place and time is in the womb. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou was cast from the womb, I sanctified thee, I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. That is your purpose, and that is what, from this time forth and even forevermore. It's when he wrote that on your heart, and it was before you were formed in the belly, because his heart is your heart. Use it wisely. Let me see here. And remember, folks, when we think about these forms and stuff, I want to reiterate, this is that form I was reading from. Let me pull it up, Certification of Identity, and we were talking about Public Use Reports Project. Down here they have notes. And again, it says name of individual who is the subject of the record. And remember, the individual's name and number identify the record. So the name of the individual is what? Is part of what identifies the record. It never identifies you. It's part of what identifies the record. Well, what record are you wanting to identify? Because that name would have to match up with a different number. If you want the medical records, we would have to go to my family doctor and find out what he uses for an identification number with that legal name. If you want the Social Security number, you would have to go to the Social Security office and find out what they use for that number. I can't give these numbers out. I'm not the officer you need to ask. I'm not an officer. I'm not an agent. I'm not a resident. I'm not a citizen. I'm a transient sojourner with him, as he said, Psalms 121:8. The Lord shall preserve thy going out, thy coming in from this time forth, and even forevermore, across all of the lands of his possession, which are not to be sold forever, for ye are strangers and sojourners with him. And in all of those lands of your possession, ye shall grant a redemption. Pure and simple. Looks like we lost Moose.
Yeah, he said good
All
night.
right. Yeah, he says the girls need him. So, all right. Well, we're just about done here. You got anything on that there?
No.
Because the next one I got, guys, remember, I've been telling you how this is all related to securitization and signing your name as you're endorsing it, and therefore you're amending an insurance policy, taking on a surety position, a suretyship. That means you're dealing with securities. Again, if you take on a suretyship in that signature, that's a securitized instrument. So we're dealing with securities. So what's this got to do with securities in regards to correcting what's going on is that Rule 10b-5 under the federal code here is the Securities and Exchange Commission regulation. Remember, again, it's all regulations, not laws. It's regulations, rules, and guidance principles that prohibit securities fraud. The SEC promulgated Rule 10b-5 under Section 10b of the Exchange Act, which authorizes the SEC to regulate securities frauds. The text of the regulation, formerly 17 CFR 240.10b5, states that it shall be unlawful for any person to employ any device, scheme, or artifice to defraud, to make any untrue statement of material fact, or to admit to state a material fact. The information I just gave you folks, you have a duty. You have a duty upon knowing this stuff to share it out. That when you're signing those instruments, I'm sorry, but I believe that it's a okay. I believe it's amending an insurance policy anytime I sign my name in an endorsement fashion, according to what I know. And I'm telling you, people, don't believe me. Do your research. You have to know how to state this stuff. Don't sit there and copy this off after I do this stream and think it's going to do you any good. It's not. And I can't take any liability for it because I can't give you any legal advice. I'm giving you a reference on what I could say in my particular situation. And that's it. So it's a matter of being able to use the information in an appropriate manner by knowing it enough yourself. If you think you're going to go into these courts and use information that somebody else put down and think it's going to work for you without you doing the work, you forget the concept of faith is dead without works. You can't have faith in me. You have to have faith in the power and the truth. And that's why I say don't believe me, because I'm not the one that holds your truth or your power. You have to do the research so you can find that yourself. So anyway, it's a matter of realizing that they're swapping everything, and you're being a surety and standing in place. And that's one of the things that Scripture tells us not to do. We're not supposed to stand in for surety. That's for the heathens. We're supposed to enslave the heathens in the suretyship. We're supposed to be making bond servants of them. How do you make bond servants of them? You let them know who your fucking daddy is. And it ain't them. Let me get back to this real quick. Or engage in any act, practice, or business, or course of business, which operates or would operate as a fraud or deceit upon any person in connection with the purchase or sale of any security. Do you have to sign that identification document? Did you know that signing that identification document, that is the security itself? Did you know that when you hand that identification document over to that officer, you just gave him property that belongs to the state? This is a transfer. You transferred state property over to him, and you acted as the trustee that transferred that state property over to him for his benefit. That is the presumption of the law, and he used it for his benefit and got paid well for it. The identification itself is the deceit, people. The identification itself is the deceit. Matter of fact, let me put those in the chat sections real quick. I forgot to put those. I always use King James Version Bible, and it is Isaiah 43:1, Isaiah 44:5, and Psalms 121:8, and the final one is the Jeremiah 1:5. That's our purpose in this world. We're brought into this world by God to travel with God across God's lands and granting redemption to God's lands and to God's people. We're not supposed to be the heathens. We're not supposed to be the debtors. We're the redeemers. You fall subject to that identification, you become that heathen. What do you think?
I think we need a break free.
If he's no respecter of persons and you're always operating in person, then how do you suppose he's going to recognize you? How do you suppose he's going to weigh the weight of your heart if it's filled with gold? It's what we've been trained in. I appreciate that, Moose. Moose says, you really have inspired me. I'm glad that you asked me to come check out your stuff and that I'm in the headspace that I can accept it. Yeah, Moose, go clean that baby's diaper real quick and join us again sometime. Moose is learning about messes. I explained to him that I don't care what kind of success you have. You're always going to have a mess to clean up. And I'm sure he recognizes that now, but our children are one of the biggest messes we've got to clean up, folks. Let's clean it up before they get messy. And with that, I think I am done. Yeah, that's all I got for this. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I appreciate you joining me. If you got anything else to say, Danielle, we can certainly keep going longer. But I've got more to come back with. Matter of fact, I got a video of a guy that I'm going to come back with tomorrow, Lane Myers. He's got a couple videos out I checked out and just destroying these people. So I'm going to do a video review. There's like almost 3 hours of video to review, so it's going to be a nice one tomorrow. I'll probably start out in the morning sometime.
I gotta go to AutoZone tomorrow myself. Get my headlight fixed, hopefully.
Yeah, I got to have them slave lights fixed and working right.
No, not in Virginia. Not in Virginia. They don't. If you pass their so-called inspection, you got 1 year to get your shit fixed. They won't pull you over for a busted taillight or busted headlight. They don't actually pull you over for that.
Pull you over for fucking picking your nose around here.
They stopped doing that.
You couldn't possibly see where you're going. Your nose was your finger was so far up your nose.
They stopped doing that halfway mark of the pandemic.
Really interesting.
And they haven't reverted that aspect of it yet.
All right. Well, if that's all we got then, folks, we will say good night. You know my usual. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. So may God bless you, and have a good night, folks. We'll see you again tomorrow. Like I said, we're going to do a video with a video review of a guy named Lane Myers. Evidently, he's a practicing attorney, and they played some games with him. Didn't realize he was quite so good at what he's doing. So, so we're going to have some fun with it. So until then, y'all have a good night. We'll see you again then. Bye now.